A figure in clear distress walks into the River Thames. As the TARDIS materialises in the same location, the Doctor muses around the console as he is disturbed by the TARDIS scanner seemingly not working, with none of the others knowing what it's displaying either. Susan checks the status of the outside environment, revealing that they are on Earth, with them even potentially having finally returned to London. Despite the Doctor not knowing whether they've landed in the 1970s or the 25th century, the school teachers are still glad to be back. But the Doctor, however, is concerned at the deterioration of the environment around them, with him wanting to be sure that they have returned to the correct time. The four have to suddenly move out of the way as rubble from the bridge above them comes crashing down and blocks access to the TARDIS. Ian notices a warehouse in the distance that could contain the objects he needs in order to regain access. Him and the Doctor decide to investigate it, with Barbara staying behind with Susan, who had sprained her ankle. As the Doctor and Ian make their way through the warehouse, an unknown individual is seen spying on them. The pair realise that the warehouse has been abandoned for quite some time. The Doctor finds a calendar reading 2164, placing them in the 22nd century. As Barbara tries to get water, she notices a body floating in the river. She quickly backs away, but realises Susan is missing. A man suddenly approaches her and informs her that Susan has been taken by someone called Tyler. The man quickly informs her to follow him due to some apparent danger. The Doctor goes through some boxes, knocking over an unconscious figure in the process. Ian notices that some sort of contraption is on his head, with the Doctor figuring that it enables the use of high-frequency radio waves. Before they discover the individual has been killed, and with them continuously hearing creaking, they decide to investigate. Finding nothing, the Doctor and Ian return to the area surrounding the TARDIS, where they realise Barbara and Susan have disappeared. Barbara and Susan are brought to an underground base by Tyler, where they meet David Campbell and Dortmund. Campbell decides to go and find the Doctor and Ian after having spied on them earlier, and revealing himself to have killed the figure in the box, calling it a Robo-Man. Before he can reach the Doctor and Ian, however, he notices more Robo-Men head towards them. The Doctor and Ian are quickly surrounded, and before they are able to dive into the water to escape, they notice a Dalek emerge from it. The Dalek orders the Robo-Men to take the Doctor and Ian to their landing site, but not before the Doctor decides to talk to the Dalek to find out more information. Tyler introduces Barbara and Susan to Jenny, who is to look after the pair while he is busy working with Dortmund to plan an attack against the Daleks, with Dortmund having created a bomb to destroy them. Campbell returns to the base and reveals that the Doctor and Ian have been taken to the Dalek saucer heliport in Chelsea. The Doctor reveals that the events that took place on Skaro with their first encounter with the Daleks was way ahead in their future, with these Daleks having adapted themselves in order to be able to traverse Earth. 2 additional prisoners, one being called Larry Madsen, have been captured, with the other trying to escape, which leads to the Daleks exterminating him. Jenny informs Barbara that the Robo-Men are prisoners who the Daleks turned into robots to increase their numbers. The Doctor and Ian are placed into a cell and discuss what they have noticed and how they can escape, with the Doctor telling a third prisoner, Jack Craddock, that he shouldn't be so pessimistic. Craddock informs the pair of how the invasion began with meteorites, then a plague, and finally the Daleks, who have been waiting for Earth to get weak, with Campbell explaining the same to Susan and Barbara. The Daleks have set up mines on the Earth, wanting something under the ground. The Daleks continuously offer the Resistance a choice over the radio to either surrender and become mine workers, which would allow them to stay alive, or be destroyed alongside the whole of London. Dortmund reveals his bomb to the rest of the Resistance, deciding to surprise attack the Dalek heliport. They just need one victory to spark the fire of a new hope against the Daleks. Barbara comes up with the idea that they can disguise themselves as Robomen in order to sneak right into the middle of the Dalek operation without being noticed. The Doctor and Ian analyse the objects left in their cell using their shared skill of science, being able to create a pair of magnetic bars that can be used to open their cell door from the inside. But the Daleks quickly reveal that it was a test and separate the Doctor from the other two to get robotized. Barbara, Campbell and Susan have reached the heliport and are waiting for the others to arrive, quickly throwing the bombs at the Daleks once they do. Tyler uses this to get into the saucer and with the other members of the Resistance start to free the prisoners. As a Robo-Man begins to operate on the Doctor, they are quickly overpowered by the Resistance. The Resistance try to escape the saucer using more bombs, but the majority of them get killed in the process, with the bombs failing to be effective. Ian briefly escapes and notices Barbara before they have to hide from a Dalek, which forces Ian to re-enter the saucer. Barbara and Jenny have returned to the base, with them deeming the attack a failure, having suffered many losses, with lots of people being unaccounted for. Dortmund wants to focus on working on his bomb to correct its functionality, but Tyler thinks they should all leave London, with the Daleks now likely to be specifically targeting them. Tyler leaves, while Dortmund plans to go to the Civic Transport Museum with Barbara and Jenny, who decide to go with him despite the danger of being out in the open. With Ian still hiding on board, the Daleks take their saucer to their mine operation in central England. Madsen is still on board, with the pair overpowering a Robo-Man in order to prevent either of them becoming one. Madsen wants to be taken to the mines in order to locate his brother. Susan and Campbell are evading a Dalek, with Susan hoping that perhaps he could come with her, though he doesn't want a life of constant travel, feeling like he'd just be running away. They soon hear a noise, briefly thinking it's another Dalek, before it's revealed to be an individual known as Baker carrying the Doctor, who is recovering from the drugs the Daleks had given him. Barbara and Jenny escort Dortmund throughout London while the Daleks patrol. They reach the Transport Museum, where Dortmund is able to finish the anti-Dalek bomb, revealing that the problem was their outer casing, which they call Dalekanium. Dortmund wants Barbara to locate the Doctor and give him the notes on his bomb. They decide it's time to leave, but as Barbara goes to fetch Jenny, Dortmund quietly leaves himself, placing his notes on the table before deciding to try and use his bomb as a distraction so the others can successfully escape, though the Daleks quickly exterminate him. The Doctor feels like Susan is more interested in following Campbell's direction than his, but before Susan can fully explain, Campbell returns and asks the Doctor what their next move should be, with the Doctor agreeing with what Susan had said before, that they should head north in order to reunite with the Resistance. The saucer has landed at the mine, and with all the Dalek forces exiting, Ian and Madsen are able to sneak out via the disposal chute. Two Robomen carry a bomb near to the Doctor's location, which then starts to tick. The Doctor suddenly collapses, leaving it up to Susan and Campbell to try and figure out how to disarm the bomb. Campbell uses the acid inside one of the bombs Dortmund made in order to burn into the casing and disarm it from the inside. Campbell convinces Susan to leave the Doctor, with the Daleks assuming that their bomb has exploded, thus not needing to patrol the area, keeping him safe. Barbara and Jenny prepare a lorry in the Transport Museum in order to leave London, while Ian and Madsen notice a Dalek mine patrol containing lots of humans being forced to pull a cart along some tracks before they are noticed by an individual known as Wells. Before Wells can ask them anything, a Robo-Man notices them. Ian telling it to get new orders causes a malfunction which allows the Three to bide some time and knock the Robo-Man out. Wells came to the camp to find Ashton, who is somehow able to get in and out of the camp without being noticed, with Ian deciding to meet this individual. As Barbara and Jenny prepare to leave, they get into an argument about Dortmund's decision, with Barbara telling Jenny that he did it to allow them a chance. Campbell and Susan traverse the London sewers, where they find a shell casing, with Campbell revealing that there are hostile people who would kill them for food, with them soon being held at gunpoint. Barbara and Jenny are able to smash through a Dalek patrol with their lorry, but this soon alerts a Dalek saucer to their presence, with the pair having to quickly flee before it is destroyed. The gunman is revealed to be Tyler, who has reunited with Susan and Campbell, with Tyler having previously shot some alligators. Susan states that rebuilding the planet would be a wonderful idea, with Campbell suggesting that she could aid him in doing it. Ian and Madsen come across an unknown creature. They quickly hide from it, but come under gunpoint by Ashton, who Ian wants to aid him with passage to London, though Ashton wants payment for this. Ian, not having any, is told by Ashton to leave, hoping Ian avoids the creature known as the Sliver. Before the situation can escalate any further, Wells enters the room and gives Ashton some jewellery in exchange for the food he's giving to Wells. Wells informs Ian and Madsen that the Sliver is a pet of the Daleks and that it's placed there in order to guard, roaming the area at night in search of people to eat. Susan and Campbell have become separated from Tyler. Susan comes across a body of water containing alligators, nearly falling into it after the ladder she uses suddenly breaks. Tyler returns and is able to realign the ladder while Campbell pulls her up. Tyler has found the Doctor, who is waiting for them above ground. As Ian, Madsen, Wells and Ashton eat, the Sliver suddenly bursts into the room and attacks Ashton. The three others make a run for it, but Madsen and Ian become trapped as they are stuck in between a mine shaft and the Sliver. Ian and Madsen climb into a waste bucket as the Sliver approaches them. It tries to jump into the bucket, but ends up falling when Ian continuously hits it with a rock. The Daleks lower the bucket, taking the two with it. The Doctor, Susan, Campbell and Tyler have re-entered the sewers as Robo-Men follow them into it, who they surprise attack. Barbara and Jenny come across a hut with a mother and daughter. The two reveal that they have been spared by the Daleks as they make clothes for the workers. The daughter leaves to supposedly deliver the clothes, which makes Barbara and Jenny suspicious of the pair. Ian and Madsen reach the bottom of the mine, but Madsen has injured his leg, requiring Ian to help him move. The daughter returns, revealing that she had revealed Barbara and Jenny's presence to the Daleks, with one of them taking the pair to the mines. Ian and Madsen discover that his brother Phil has been turned into a Robo-Man. Madsen tries to plead with him to remember his former life, but this results in him taking Madsen's instead. But before he dies, he's able to defeat his robotized brother, who briefly gains his humanity back before dying himself. Susan and Campbell have made a campsite in the wilderness, where the two end up play fighting over a fish before kissing. They quickly stop when they realise the Doctor and Tyler are approaching them. The Doctor, having analysed the mine, has deduced that it is the Daleks' main base of operations, surprising the others, with them just assuming they were digging for resources. The Doctor, on the other hand, thinks it may be the key as to why the Daleks are on Earth to begin with, not because they find any use in humans, but because they're digging for something tampering with the Earth's very core. Ian notices a Robo-Man patrol and quickly hides from it, seeing that Barbara was among the workers present. Barbara and Jenny are tasked to empty buckets that are filled with rocks. As Jenny drops one of them, she feels defeated, with Barbara having to remind her of the positives. They reach the mine and to try and think like the Doctor does. Barbara decides to try and use Dortmund's bomb schematics to convince the Daleks to take her to the highest Dalek authority, with the Supreme Dalek agreeing to meet with her, but with a warning that if she is lying, she will be exterminated. The Daleks reveal that they are only 4 miles away from reaching the core of the Earth, with them wanting to destroy the Earth's magnetic forces, which they have called Project Degravitate. Their ultimate goal is to replace the Earth's core with a system that will allow them to move the Earth in space. Ian has found his way into the Dalek gallery, quickly hiding in one of their machines, which is quickly revealed to be the capsule they intend to throw into the Earth's open fissure to explode. Ian is able to pull out some of the capsule's wires, which stops its progress, with the Robo-Men then pulling the capsule back up the chute in response. Ian's continued tampering opens a hatch, allowing him to leave, though the Daleks notice his presence, causing the Supreme Dalek to order his extermination, inadvertently causing the rope he was holding onto being cut and him falling down the chute. Barbara and Jenny have been taken to the Daleks' main control room, where Barbara uses her knowledge of history to manipulate the Daleks into believing her false claims of a revolt, though the Daleks quickly see through this and shackle them to the wall, intending to later take them with the other workers to the impact site of their bomb to quickly dispose of. The Doctor, Susan, Campbell and Tyler are scoping out the Dalek base of operations from a nearby ravine. The Doctor orders Susan and Campbell to sabotage part of the base's exterior, while him and Tyler climb down the ravine in order to enter the base directly. Ian is able to open a hatch to escape. He decides to sabotage the chute by wedging the door open with some tall, thin logs. The Daleks then refire the capsule, where it gets caught on the logs. As the Daleks leave the base, they don't notice the Doctor and Tyler, who quickly run into Barbara and Jenny, with the pair informing the Doctor of the Daleks' full intentions, with the Doctor's plan in return being to immobilize the Daleks, though his tampering with their scanner has alerted them of his presence, with Susan and Campbell being successful just before a Dalek returns to the control room. The Doctor and Barbara are now able to successfully order the Robo-Men to revolt against the Daleks, with the workers not hesitating to join in. Ian reunites with the Doctor and Barbara during the chaos, and with Ian jamming the capsule, it won't destroy the Earth's core, but will instead blow up the mine, forcing them all to leave before they are caught in it, with the Daleks' reign ending via a volcanic eruption right in the centre of England. The debris in front of the TARDIS has been removed. The Doctor speaks with Susan, where she shows him how one of her shoes has worn right through, before he decides to leave her with Campbell to check on the TARDIS. Barbara also quietly ushers Ian into the TARDIS as well. Campbell asks Susan to stay with him, but she feels that she doesn't belong in this time zone and she doesn't want to have to choose between him or her grandfather. Though in the end, she doesn't have to choose, as her grandfather makes the choice for her, stating over the TARDIS's loudspeaker that he'll come back one day to see her, but that he also wants her to belong somewhere and to have a life of her own, before he says goodbye and the TARDIS dematerializes. Susan briefly puts her hands out, feeling the air where the TARDIS once stood, then moving around the space and looking into the sky. Campbell holds out his hand to her and she reaches for it, with him telling her the Doctor knew she could never leave him. The two begin to walk away as it's revealed that Susan has left her TARDIS key behind. The Dalek Invasion of Earth is the final story to be produced under the show's first production block of 52 episodes. It was given the production letter K. Like the previous serial, Planet of Giants, it was held over from the first season and instead released as part of season 2. Just like the first Dalek serial, the Dalek Invasion of Earth was written by Terry Nation while being directed by Richard Martin, who had also partially directed the first. Richard Martin was originally slated to direct Planet of Giants, but was instead moved to this story. Verity Lambert produced the serial as she had done with all the ones beforehand. The Dalek Invasion of Earth marks the last story where all 4 of the original cast featured, with the production team and Carol Ann Ford having decided that it was best for Susan to be retired from the show after her characterization did not go to plan. While no actors had any plans to go on holiday throughout the rehearsal and recording sessions for the story, during the recording of episode 3, William Hartnell suffered a back injury due to the ramp of the Dalek saucer collapsing, requiring him to have to take off a few days to recover, which coincided with the recording of episode 4. The Doctor's role was thus reduced to a cameo scene recorded by double Edmund Warwick, with the script being altered to state that the Doctor had become tired due to being constantly pursued by the Daleks. The Dalek Invasion of Earth was planned as early as the 2nd of March 1964, with it being penciled in as Serial J before they realised they had to skip over the letter I. A few weeks later, on the 17th, Terry Nation was officially commissioned to write the Dalek Invasion of Earth, with it having the production title of Doctor Who and the Daleks, as the original Dalek serial was referred to as Doctor Who and the Mutants. Nation was given a script delivery deadline of the 19th of June, with him agreeing to these terms officially on the 6th of April. Before Nation had agreed to write the serial, however, the production office got the 4 main cast members' contracts officially amended to cover everything up to Serial K. Terry Nation would end up delivering his draft scripts for episodes 2 to 4 on the 7th of August 1964, with the final 2 being delivered on the 13th. They were later rewritten by David Whittaker into their final iterations, including altering the surname of David from Sondheim to Archer and then Campbell, the character of Roger Krish being renamed to Baker, as well as renaming the character of Sada to Jenny, as well as making her older, which also removed her intended role as Susan's successor, as they were unsure if the show was getting renewed for a second production block. The draft script of episode 1 had the episode titled The Invaders. Differences included the TARDIS travellers exiting the TARDIS and discovering a deceased person who was killed by some sort of energy beam a while beforehand, the abandoned warehouse the Doctor and Ian find themselves in being intended to have a large tree having smashed into its window and growing a branch inside, visually referencing its year as 2041 via the calendar, with the Doctor having previously assumed they had landed in 1970s London due to the area being roughly the same as it was when he left in 1963, apart from showing signs of having experienced some sort of plague. Barbara looking for Susan and coming across the Robo-Men at Trafalgar Square's saucer landing site, but fleeing before she saw any more, and the episode ending with the Doctor and Ian realizing realising they're up against the Daleks when they come across the landing site themselves and one exits the saucer. The story was moved a century forward, removing references to a previous Dalek attack in 1980. The deceased individual was replaced with a Robo-Man malfunctioning and drowning itself in the River Thames, which Barbara notices later on while trying to get resources for Susan's swollen ankle. The age of the warehouse was instead shown by its exterior walkway breaking when Ian tried to use it. The Trafalgar Square landing site was replaced with a heliport in Chelsea, and the cliffhanger at said landing site was moved to the same location as the start of the episode, with the Dalek instead emerging from the water. Episode 2 opened with Barbara having already been taken to the secret base by Tyler, which was to be located in the London Underground. Sada's introduction came soon after. The grey and black Dalek leader was intended to be the Dalek Supreme, later featured in the story, with this being the intention all the way up until the recording of the episode, when it was replaced with a silver and grey Dalek instead, with the Dalek Supreme's introduction being pushed to episode 3. The exposition scene in the Dalek cell is not present in this iteration of the script, instead being given by Campbell and Craddock within their secret base, with the latter character having already been captured in the final episode and never being shown as part of the Resistance. This was changed with the rehearsal script to be interspliced between Craddock in the cells and Campbell and Jenny in the Resistance base. Susan would join the others in the attack on the saucer, like in the final episode, but Barbara would stay behind at the base with Dortmund and Sada. The Daleks' plan for the Doctor to be robotized had more dialogue exposition present, including an explanation of him forgetting his former identity. The episode ended with the Resistance attacking the Dalek saucer and freeing the Doctor, but then being apprehended by the Daleks as they try to escape, with this being changed to the Doctor being drugged and his robotizing about to begin. Episode 3 had Ian retreat further into the Dalek saucer, while Susan and Campbell are able to hide in a nearby building. The remaining Resistance members in the base, alongside Barbara, heard of the failed attack and decided to flee into the countryside. While the final production had Ian briefly leave the Dalek ship before having to re-enter to hide from the Daleks, while most of the Resistance members died in the attack. Barbara, Sada and Dortmund travelled through the London Underground, with their route also being planned to show Daleks on Westminster Bridge and other landmarks such as the Lion statues near Nelson's Column, the Albert Hall and Memorial, Kensington Gardens, Hyde Park, BBC Television Centre and Whitehall, with the final episode cutting this down to just 3 of those locations and replacing the underground with above-ground streets. Ian overheard that the robotizing machine had been damaged and the Daleks decided to travel to Earth Base 1 to fix it, which wrote Ian out of the rest of the episode. But with Madsen's introduction being moved earlier into the story, Ian's role was also extended to be more fully featured throughout the episode. As Dortmund sacrificed himself, Sada would have revealed to Barbara that he was her father. The episode ended with the Doctor, Susan and Campbell being reunited, with them trying to sleep amongst the rubble, but mines would begin to be set off. The 3 tried to evacuate the area, but the Doctor would have been unable to walk. Episode 4, at this stage, was titled The Abyss. With the Doctor unable to walk, he dragged himself towards the mine and smashed it open, while Campbell poured acid into it, with this being changed to the Robo-Men placing a bomb in the area and Susan being present in place of the Doctor, making Campbell do all of the disarming work. The Dalek saucer made it to Earth Base 1, and while the Daleks and Robo-Men were distracted reporting to their superiors, Ian would have located 4 prisoners within the saucer's cells. 2 were injured, another was tending to them, and the character of Larry Madsen, who was originally called Robbie Madsen, decided to leave with Ian. This was replaced in the final version with the earlier sequence of him overpowering the Robo-Man with Ian before the Daleks arrived at their base. Barbara and Sada were able to locate a working bus within London's Transport Museum and used it to escape a limited distance before it was destroyed by a Dalek saucer, with them just being able to escape it before being caught in the blast. The vehicle was ultimately changed to a lorry in the final production. The Dr. Susan and Campbell traversed London through its sewers, being able to avoid Daleks, Robo-Men and mines, but they still had the potential to come across cannibals created by the plague. Ian and Madsen hid in a tin shed and met Ashton, who informed the duo of the Dalek sliver creatures, with them also originating from Skaro. Ashton would have told them that it's best that they surrender before they get captured. By this point in the story, Susan had developed an attraction and interest in Campbell, with her getting impatient about being stuck in the sewers and skipping ahead before disappearing. The Doctor and Campbell were then to be surrounded by cannibals. The final production replaced the cannibals with a brief scene involving alligators and had Tyler reunite with Campbell, Susan and the Doctor earlier in the story, with the Doctor mostly being written out of the episode due to Hartnell's previously mentioned behind-the-scenes injury. Episode 5 had Madsen deliver more exposition to Ian that even before the Daleks arrived, the world was doomed, with China being at war with the United States and Russia, while Britain was having huge tensions with the rest of Europe. The plague then became the common enemy that caused the fighting to cease and the countries to come together. The cannibals captured the Dr. Susan and Campbell and begin to attempt to kill Susan, but one of them was shot by Tyler before they could carry this out, with this being replaced with the already mentioned episode 4 alligator sequence and then the brief Robo-Men attack in the sewers. Barbara and Sada were lured into a hut by one of 3 elderly women, who then drugged them with food and handed them over to the Daleks in a deal they had made to leave the elderly be as long as they hand over young workers. This was changed to just a mother and daughter, and the drugging plot was replaced with the daughter pretending to deliver clothes to the mine workers, but actually reporting Barbara and Jenny to the Daleks, who come and capture them. Madsen's missing brother, who became a Robo-Man, killing Madsen, and the character of Wells are not present at the mine in this version of the episode, with Wells only initially being planned to appear in one episode, before it was later decided to have him become the leader of the mine rebellion in the further 2. Susan and Campbell's campfire kiss scene and the dialogue between the Doctor and Tyler were also not present within the script. The Daleks' core bomb was written to be placed into a cable car that was to be lowered into the Earth's fissure. This was replaced in the final production with a Dalek bomb capsule that Ian inadvertently hides in as it is being prepared to be sent down a chute into the Earth's core. Episode 6, titled Earth Resistance, in its draft script, is the most different compared to the iteration that would be filmed, with the action sequences ultimately being tightened. The Daleks stationed around the world would all return to the mine site in order to witness the core's destruction, with them also deciding to use the explosion to dispose of their captured workers. Ian escaped the cable car by climbing onto its roof and then down one of its cables, where he then quickly reunited with Barbara. He hurried her and the other workers to the exit before it was too late, which further led to them reuniting with the Doctor and Tyler, but Ian informed them that all may be lost, as the cable car carrying the bomb may fall faster, with its wires deteriorating and the resulting blast potentially causing the creation of a huge volcano. The bomb does end up dropping, but it instead somehow hit the Dalek saucers. Several days later, the wreckage around the TARDIS that prevented the travellers from leaving was cleared. while Susan was torn between her feelings for Campbell and wanting to stay with her grandfather. Campbell asked her to stay and help rebuild the world after there was very few survivors. The pair would kiss, with this informing the Doctor of Susan's decision, with him then entering the TARDIS, giving Campbell a nod in the process. The Doctor promised Susan he would come back to see the world that she had built, with him very softly saying goodbye to her as the TARDIS dematerialised. Susan did not walk away and drop her TARDIS key in this version. Instead, she rested her head on Campbell's shoulder and looked up to the sky. An additional scene was present in the script but cut from the recorded version after Sada was dropped as Susan's replacement, where the Doctor, Ian and Barbara are in the TARDIS as the Doctor deeply sighs while not taking much notice of Barbara and Ian's concern for him. The three would then suddenly hear a voice excitedly stating hello, with them turning around to see that Sada had stowed away with them, cueing the episode's end credits. The Dalek Invasion of Earth was the first futuristic serial not designed by Raymond Cusick, with Spencer Chapman taking over this role. He focused on the mechanical aspect of the designs more so than he had previously done on other productions. He also came up with the idea of the Dalek graffiti on well-known landmarks in order to show that the Daleks have marked their presence and ownership of the location. In August 1964, the BBC ordered the production of 2 new Daleks, alongside having the 4 existing ones from their first story be modified with larger skirts that allowed the assumption of the Daleks having a hovercraft-like ability to climb stairs, as well as dishes located on their backs in order to communicate with their command ships, also explaining where they get their power source from now that they weren't using the static electricity in their city on Skaro, with these Daleks being adapted into an invasion force. More variety in the colour schemes was also achieved, with them having a silver and grey striped Dalek, as well as the fully black Supreme one. The Daleks were modified even further for the on-location sequences in order to speed up their movement to get all of the shots completed within the time they had been allowed. Location filming for the serial would begin on the 23rd of August. The opening sequence of World's End was recorded at Kew Rail Bridge in Hammersmith, London on the 25th of August, with all 4 main cast members in attendance, with further filming continuing on the 27th. This was initially planned to be carried out at Hammersmith Bridge itself, but this location was found to be too hard to replicate in studio, so Chapman had them move it to the rail bridge, though the sequence of the Dalek emerging from the water was still partially filmed at the original planned location. Another reason why they filmed at Hammersmith was due to the quality of the River Thames being so bad that they needed to make sure they were nearby a hospital in case any of the actors interacting with the water became ill. 6 days of location filming were done in total, including the on-location mine scenes being filmed on the 28th. The sewer filming was also done at some point during this at Ealing Studios, with them using a tank for the first time in the show's production, which contained actual baby crocodiles. The Dalek Invasion of Earth's episodes were recorded between the 18th of September and the 23rd of October 1964. For the first time in the show's production, neither Lime Grove or Television Centre were used, with them instead using the much superior Riverside Studios, allowing a much larger scale compared to previously produced serials. It also allowed much more variety in the height of camera angles. The Dalek Source's interior was initially designed as a model, with Chapman designing that and then director Richard Martin taking over, with him being very specific about certain details such as what parts of the Source's interior actually worked, as well as the design of the doors between its rooms, with the entire interior set being built as one big unit so they could film it all the way through. The London sets were more up to Chapman to design, with him being asked by Martin what to provide. There were a total of 20 Daleks featured in the serial, with most of them being cardboard cutouts to fill scenes and hopefully give the effect of scale. Hartnell would remove 2 lines of dialogue from the goodbye speech to Susan, written by David Whittaker, one mentioning to Campbell to make sure to show Susan how life on Earth can be a great adventure, as well as stating to remember that love is the most precious jewel of all. The sets that read "vetoed" was an in-joke by the set designers, who would stamp the word on the sets that were regarded as too ambitious before being returned to the designers to refine for production standards, with this then being repurposed within the story itself to be a method of communication for the Resistance. The amount of sets used for the serial was the most that Doctor Who had used up to this point. The 6 episodes were released on BBC One between the 21st of November and the 26th of December 1964. Thankfully, all 6 episodes of the Dalek Invasion of Earth survive via 60mm telerecording copies, which were created by the BBC in order to sell the episodes to overseas broadcasters, with these being recovered in 1978. The BBC also have a copy of The Waking Ally in 35mm film. Richard Martin is rumoured to have a private collection of telesnaps for his episodes, including the 6 that form the Dalek Invasion of Earth, though some from episodes 1, 2 and 6 are included on the PDF on the Season 2 collection set. Most of them are unreleased. Besides simply Doctor Who and the Daleks, several other working titles are also known to exist, including Daleks Threaten Earth, The Invaders, which Terry Nation also used for his episode 1 script, The Daleks (2), The Return of the Daleks, and The Daleks in Europe. The Dalek Invasion of Earth returns us to a sci-fi story set in the future after the previous minuscule tale. The Dalek Invasion of Earth Episode 2 shares its name with the original Dalek serial of Season 1, though back when this was released, that story was still known as The Mutants, due to it predating the release of the 3rd Doctor serial of the same name. The Dalek emerging from the water at the end of Episode 1 was created in 3 shots, where they had to stop between each and alter the Dalek's configuration to make each segment possible. During a lunch break, everyone in the studio would often leave the Dalek operators within their casings, with them not being able to exit them themselves, as they needed someone else to remove the top portion in order to get out of it. Anne Davies hid her hair during location filming due to her not being able to dye it blonde to make Jenny more distinct from Susan before the dates that the filming was carried out. Anne liked working with Jacqueline Hill, and years later, Hill would live near her and they became good friends up until her death, though she was intimidated by William Hartnell, deciding to avoid him on set as much as possible. Jean Conroy, who had played one of the women who informed the Daleks of Barbara and Jenny's presence, died in a street accident before her episode had even been broadcast, with her becoming the first person to pass away after having worked on the programme. The Dalek dialogue was altered for their final lines, with them having a difference in their ring modulation, a change which would be carried forward for all future Dalek appearances. Terry Nation, having been commissioned beforehand to write the ultimately unproduced 6-part Red Fort serial about the Indian Mutiny, worked in a reference to it within this serial's final episode Flashpoint, during Barbara's ruse of a revolt against the Daleks. Jenny's original incarnation, Seda, was supposed to be a 14-year-old girl of Indian descent, played by Pamela Franklin, before the role was changed and director Richard Martin cast Anne Davies instead, though initially she couldn't be offered the role as they were still deciding on whether she was to be Susan's replacement or not. The magnetised Dalek prison shackles had to be held in place by the actors due to the small size of the magnets the design team used. The Dalek Invasion of Earth is well known for Susan's departure, with the Doctor promising her that one day he will come back. This has become relevant again, with the current iteration of the show having referenced her by name several times, with the end of Ncuti Gatwa's second series having been planned to tease a future return for the character, though this was quietly dropped by the BBC when their deal with Disney Plus wasn't renewed quick enough, leading to Ncuti Gatwa to leave the role prematurely in order to continue his in-demand acting career. The Doctor, after all these years, has never acted on his promise, though Carol Ann Ford has since returned as Susan in The Five Doctors and briefly in Dimensions in Time, though these roles did not do anything for her character besides her just being present. Doctor Who's expanded universe would come to the rescue with both a BBC radio drama titled Whatever Happened to Susan Foreman, starring Jane Asher as Susan, as well as many Big Finish audio dramas starring Carol Ann Ford, which cover not only gaps in her original on-screen tenure, but also adaptations of unfinished serials and future events in her timeline, including reuniting with the Eighth Doctor, having a son, and being involved in the Time War. Susan's departure would set a staple for the Doctor's travelling companions to leave the series, being replaced with new characters. This is the first of two key staples with the show, which has enabled its longevity 2 seasons before the other key staple, that being the concept of renewal, later known as regeneration, would be introduced. Carol Ann Ford cried real tears filming Susan's last scene. During May 1964, when Susan's departure was initially planned, the production team pondered the idea of also writing out Barbara, though thankfully this didn't happen and Jacqueline Hill stayed on the show for another year. Just like with the original Dalek serial, a movie adaptation of the story was created, with Peter Cushing returning to play his alternate version of the title character, with Bernard Cribbins also starring in the movie, long before he would be cast in his 2008 Series 4 regular role as Wilfred Mott. Future serial The Daleks' Master Plan established the Dalek Invasion to have been set in 2157, which would place the events of the Dalek Invasion of Earth as 2167. The Dalek Invasion of Earth would be referenced at least 2 times within the modern Doctor Who 4th series episode, The Stolen Earth. First with the Doctor referencing the events of this story having happened a long time ago, which for him it would have been, but story-wise was actually in Earth's future. And then later on, the Daleks state they are the Masters of Earth, a direct callback to their same statement in this serial. The 7th of May 1990 saw the Dalek Invasion of Earth released to be owned on physical media for the first time, with its official VHS release. Due to how big the story is, it was split between 2 tapes. The Dalek Invasion of Earth would see its DVD release in June of 2003, and again would be a double release with 2 discs. The DVD release contained a bunch of extra special features, including multiple behind-the-scenes featurettes, as well as a new comedy short with The Sliver. The Dalek Invasion of Earth is the only 1960s serial to get new optional special effects on its DVD release, replacing the original image of Battersea Power Station with new footage of it, having 2 of its chimneys digitally removed and a new model of a nuclear reactor added. The exterior Dalek saucer shot were also all replaced with CGI renditions that were inspired by sci-fi movies from the 1950s. A quote, side-on shot was included to make it seem more authentic to what they may have done with this technology had they been able to use it in 1964. The CGI shot of Trafalgar Square used a 3D saucer model, but the location itself was a 2D animation with separate layers for its foreground and background. The Dalek saucer itself was designed after ones that were featured within 1960s Dalek comics. The shot of the Dalek saucer shooting the lorry combined CGI with real spark effects while improving the final image with interactive digital lighting. They kept the original shot of the model lorry exploding, but overlaid it with an expanding glow effect that got mixed with the practical explosion of the original. These shots were degraded to match the quality of the original production. This DVD release was reissued several times, first in October of the same year as part of the Daleks Collector Edition, which was a W.H. Smith exclusive, and then again in 2007 as part of the Dalek Collection, which was an Amazon exclusive. Season 2, including the Dalek Invasion of Earth, was the 12th release in the Doctor Who The Collection range, which would be the first time the BBC would standardise releasing the classic stories in their released seasons via physical media. Season 2's limited edition was released on the 5th of December 2022, while the standard edition came 2 years later on the 2nd of December 2024. For the first time, the contents of the story were contained to only one disc. Besides the previously made DVD content, the collection set features newly restored versions of the episodes, as well as includes Behind the Sofa, which stars individuals who were involved with the show from any era who come together to watch the story. It also includes a bunch of PDF documents, such as rehearsal and camera scripts for the serial. In 2023, the Dalek Invasion of Earth was released as part of the classic Doctor Who back catalogue on BBC iPlayer, making it available to stream in the UK, which was previously stuck behind a paywall on BritBox, though the rights to the story could expire in the future, which has been the case with several later season stories. The novelisation of the Dalek Invasion of Earth was released in March 1977, being the first time the story was able to be experienced since its initial broadcast. The novelisation was reissued in 1990 and again in audiobook form in November 2009, narrated by William Russell, with Nicholas Briggs voicing the Daleks. I noticed the TARDIS in the World's End opening shot has one of its windows misplaced, with it resting inwards, revealing a tiny bit of the inside of the prop. Ian mentioning that a year or two out from the time they left reminds me how in the future story The Chase, they do end up being 2 years out, returning to Earth in the same year the story was broadcast. The Doctor being concerned about the deterioration of the environment is interesting, as there are a lot of places like that these days with people just not caring about it. While Barbara tells the Doctor not to spoil it, it's clear he just wants to make sure they have returned to the right place, with it coming from a place of care. Right on cue, Susan ends up falling off of the wall after noticing that no one is around and injuring herself. Barbara has clearly forgotten her ordeal with the pesticide in the previous serial, considering she's fine going to wet her handkerchief in the River Thames, which when this story was produced was known to be in a bad condition, and considering Barbara assumes they're in their own time, would have known that herself, with her then deducing afterwards that they're not in their own time zone, which would make it even more alarming for her to use the water. The Doctor later on even states how the water is filthy and how there is some sort of plague. It's surprising that Susan didn't get an infection from Barbara using the water on her sprained ankle, with this being an element the story never brings up again. Susan's mentioning of wanting to stay together and things having to stay the same as they are clear indicators of her upcoming exit, which will do the exact opposite. Dortmund is positive representation of someone who is disabled, showing how he is still a very capable leader despite being in a wheelchair, as well as giving his character faults like any other person would have. This was over a decade before Terry Nation would introduce Davros, which has been seen as a negative stereotype, though someone's disability does not remove the possibility of them being a terrible person. True authentic representation is showing both sides. Not all people are good, and not all people are bad. Hartnell's acting, with his eyes and hand movements, are on full display again, with this serial showing how the Doctor is always collecting info in order to figure out a plan to defeat his foe. Barbara coming up with the idea to disguise themselves as Robo-Men reminds me how glad I am that they didn't write her out of the show with this serial, despite the initial plans they had. She actually had a lot to add to the stories, unlike Susan, who was relegated to screaming, getting injured and falling in love, though she does get somewhat of an arc in her final story about not having a place of her own or her own identity, which is clearly why the Doctor decides it's best for her to stay. The Doctor's dismissal of Craddock is very amusing, again showing his characteristic of ignoring humans he regards as too unintelligent to help him. Susan finding her own identity is a relatable aspect of her character within this story, as sometimes you do need to figure out who it is that you are outside of everyone else's shadow, which is something Big Finish would touch on with Susan, with the people around her not seeing the true version of her, which was an interesting way for them to recontextualize how she was treated as a standard Earth teenager for most of her tenure, due to how the writers clearly couldn't figure out what to do with her. Even though Susan doesn't want to leave, in the end, the Doctor knows that Campbell is the person she needed to figure out her own life outside of his shadow. Barbara mentioning, "What's the point in running?" and Jenny's response of "they're not running, they're surviving," describes the life she has had since being on the TARDIS, with how they've had to flee multiple time periods and places due to the hostile situations they found themselves in. I think the minds in the original script for episode 3 and 4 make more sense than this random bomb that the Robo-Men conveniently place where the Doctor, Susan and Campbell are. Further seeds are sown for Susan's exit with her conversation with Campbell about rebuilding the Earth. Perhaps the reason why the cannibals were replaced with alligators was due to the cannibals requiring the BBC to cast even more actors for the serial, which probably had already reached its budget limit. The Sliver adds an extra bit of lore into the serial that perhaps the Daleks intend to terraform the Earth once they have beaten the Resistance. I find it a bit unbelievable at just how fast Barbara gives the old woman in the hut the food she has, especially in the situation they're in, where they might not be able to locate anymore, and it's proven to be in vain when she gets them captured by the Daleks. The Doctor's characterization of stopping villainy from Planet of Giants has been carried over into this serial, with episode 5 specifically showing his priority is to stop the Daleks from tampering with the very structure of the Earth. Barbara has a standout moment within Flashpoint, where she uses her knowledge of history to her advantage in order to manipulate the Daleks. One of the Daleks that passed the Doctor and Tyler has its eye directly facing the Doctor, but does not notice him. Campbell has known Susan for like 2 days and wants to marry her already, implying he's someone who unfortunately falls head over heels before knowing someone for that long. If I was to think of one thing that maybe hindered the serial a bit, it's probably its multiple character strands, which meant that some areas were hardly built up and it felt like the characters were there for only 5 minutes, such as in the Transport Museum, the hut with the 2 women, and the sewers, while other moments slowed the pacing right down, like the sequence of Barbara running while following Tyler and Susan, and the journey to the Transport Museum, which, while was a visual marvel at the time, did take up quite a chunk of the episode. I feel like the characterization the Doctor has been given over the years of someone who keeps moving forward because they can't look back is rooted in him deciding to leave Susan behind. Though I do prefer the original scripted version, where it's more overt that it was Susan's decision to stay instead of the Doctor essentially forcing her to. However, I do like how the final episode cements it from a place of care that she doesn't want to leave her grandfather. The original script more so followed on from the Centurites, which had a focus on showing Susan was growing up, with this serial showing the Doctor finally accepting that, which was hard for him to do in the Centurites, where he instead blamed the Centurites themselves, as it was easier for him to do that than accept Susan's maturity. Though sadly, this arc was only really depicted within the first episode of An Unearthly Child, the Centurites, and the Dalek Invasion of Earth. With modern production standards, where entire seasons are written before any production begins, they could have weaved Susan's arc into more of her stories. It was such a missed opportunity to have Susan reunite with David Bradley's first Doctor in 2017's Twice Upon a Time, show that she aged and waited years for the Doctor to act on his promise to come back, but he never did. This could have been the reason why the first Doctor refused to regenerate, because maybe he thought if he changed into someone new, then he wouldn't have been able to return to Susan. Susan in Twice Upon a Time would reveal to him that that's not true, and she'd help him accept that it's his time to regenerate. Having Susan in the story would have also allowed Capaldi to work with Carol Ann Ford, which is something he has said he wanted to do. While the whole "the Doctor needs to slow down due to their trauma" thing was done in the 60th anniversary specials with the 14th Doctor, I don't think it's as effective as if they did the same thing with Susan, considering she's the original and first time the Doctor had left someone behind. While the first Dalek serial felt like it dragged in areas, the Dalek Invasion of Earth doesn't repeat that as much, with its 6 episodes mostly going at a good pace, showing us different perspectives of the Dalek enslaved Earth, from the rundown environments to the humans who have given up, and the other humans who would and did give their lives to free their planet from the Daleks. We also get a look at how humanity makes attachments that the Daleks don't have and could never understand, in the form of Madsen's goal of finding his brother, turning out to be tragic, as he was too late to save him, with Madsen clearly blaming himself for it after failing to get through to his brother and sacrificing his life so that Ian could escape. Jenny disappears from the narrative after being captured by the Daleks alongside Barbara, with her reduced role removing the character from appearing within the final sequence of the story, with the purpose of her being paired with Barbara clearly being with the intention that she's getting the training wheels of what it's like to be a companion to the Doctor. Jenny is visually similar to Wiki, which isn't surprising because of her original intended role, though she was more mature and experienced than her. Jenny is the first of many times where Doctor Who would feature a character in a current companion's last or second to last story that was originally intended to be the next companion but ultimately wasn't. The Doctor's cut line of how life on Earth can be a great adventure reminds me of the Sarah Jane Adventures, with Sarah Jane stating a similar line of, life on Earth could be an adventure too. The Daleks are sadly missing their manipulative character trait in this serial, but there's a good reason for it in that they clearly already have the upper hand in this situation, unlike the first Dalek serial, where they are in a condition which required them to manipulate others in order to achieve their goals. Though not important to the story overall, the Daleks do briefly manipulate the Doctor and Ian in their prison cell. The Dalek Invasion of Earth is probably Hartnell's best Dalek story that fully survives via telerecordings, being an improvement on the last and solidifying itself as one of the early cornerstone sci-fi serials of the franchise, while also firmly establishing in the lore that the Doctor's companions aren't a permanent fixture and can leave the show at any time, with Susan's departure, in my opinion, being ultimately for the best, as the writers didn't know what to do with her, as well as Carol's ability to dance, swim or ride horses not being utilised once they had solidified that she was to just be the female teenage audience surrogate. Though, on the plus side, this did eventually work out, with many people telling Carol Ann Ford at conventions that they wanted to be her, so there was at the very least a silver lining to her losing the original character pitch of being this otherworldly telepathic character when it came to the audience she gained. I now have an active channel membership available. This will grant you exclusive perks like emojis in the comments, usernames listed in my outros, and updates to what's coming next posted exclusively for members in the community tab. But the best feature is you get 5 days early access to new videos and you will be supporting me at the same time. To find out more, you can click the join button on my channel page. Thank you to anyone who considers becoming a channel member. Thank you for watching. Please see the video description below for interesting links, sources and credits. If you enjoyed, please like, subscribe and comment, as it will really help the channel continue to grow further. Until the next time, goodbye.